I'm Drew.
I'm Tony.
And this is Back for Our Future, the podcast that goes back to look at our future and yours. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a very big moment. I know that we're a little bit into the new year here, but this is a momentous setting up close to the close, if not the close, of 1993, if I'm not mistaken. Tony, how you doing, buddy? We're leaving 1993. It was a good year. We're stepping into something else. Let's talk about the end of 93. How you doing?
I'm good, man. It's been kind of cool because I think a lot of this stuff, we talk about a lot of things in our friendship and everything, but we don't always get to go back in time and really focus in on the years and talk about them in great depth. So that's one of the great things about this show is that we are able to do that and get, do it at an hour block or 2 hour block at a time, however long we decide to go. But that's one of the great things about this show is that we get to go in depth and talk about all these things that happened in not just for the movies and where we saw them, but in our lives as well. And these are things that we don't always think about. So I love it. I'm gonna miss 1993, and I don't mean to get too sappy about it, of course, but I'm gonna get a little sentimental because I still feel, and it's kind of cliche, but I still feel like 1993 is like we're not completely innocent in 1993, and obviously you have Nintendo maps and stuff like that. We're not completely innocent at this time, but I still feel like it's kind of the last year of the quote-unquote innocence of our teen years, because I think by 1994 we people start getting into some more stuff, and they'll hear about it. But I mean, or they'll hear about some of it, and it's yeah. I mean, I feel like 1983 was like you can hear the summer and with So I Married an Axemer and how kind of innocent we all are with the sleepovers and having fun and playing in the street and stuff like that. That's more like really young teenage stuff, and now we're about to get into more adult teenage stuff. So I'm gonna kind of miss 1993 because I think it definitely is that pivoting moment in life for us.
Yeah, it's a great point. It is really, it's kind of interesting because you saw it with your little brother, so you experienced it that way, watching him make that transition. Like there's a point in time where you suddenly go from, it's not that the innocence is ever lost, it just changes. And to your point, like you go back now and as an adult, you're like, God, we had it so good. You don't always realize that when you're, that age, especially for us in 93, but looking at it now, it's like, man, to be able to cherish that time where it's like your number one worry is whose house you're going to spend the night at, or if that was a touchdown in the street. And then here it is just 1 year later, and we're literally going to have, you have people dealing with all kinds of heavy crap, and there's a lot of crazy stuff that goes on, and it just never stops. Like that's the beginning, not necessarily of the end, but it is the beginning of the end of innocence in some ways as we charge ahead. It's craziness. But that's, again, it's bittersweet because this is literally a document of two guys' time, two people that grew up in that period. I've had lots of people say to me that they love the fact they still listen to the show. Jim Roberson now listens, so shout out to Jim Roberson.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Great.
and Jim will show up at some point. He's going to get there eventually, but Jim will show up in the show because there's all kinds of wild stories. Maybe I can't tell some about him, but everybody that's talked to us about it that remembers some of these times, they're also celebrating their own. And I think it's really cool that this podcast, not just for us, does that for other people. We benefit directly, and so do they. That's pretty cool that we get to do that. And it makes for a big deal. So let's roll right into it. Here we are. It's December 22nd. Now, this is the movie that we're going to talk about. I'm going to tell a quick piece on this because nowadays, when we talk about any sort of like same-sex relationships or any sort of like dynamics of where it's dealing with anything related to where that line gets crossed, or it used to get crossed, the movie that comes out that really kind of sets the stage that for me as even a film guy, and I didn't necessarily see it in this period. I know you did, but
Right.
But this movie started kind of introducing me to the idea that the world's a lot bigger. So it's interesting. There's a lot more people. There's a lot more varieties of people. It's not just the kids on the street. And that a lot of these people, in the instance of this movie, they're dealing with lots of stuff that's way above our pay grade. in terms of where we are in life. And so now I look back on it and it's a classic and I understand it a lot more than I did. And that movie is Philadelphia, starring Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
What a heavy, powerful, strong movie. And what do you got on that? Because then that's a beast of a movie to open up this episode with.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, the way you brought about this film and opened it up is talking about people being different and such. When I saw the movie and I saw it at Carmike 10, when I saw this film for the first time, I thought to myself, man, this is a really different role for Tom Hanks,
Yeah.
because you gotta remember what we've seen him in leading up into this. Movies like Big and Joe versus the Volcano and Bonfire of the Vanities, and he's had some dramatic stuff in dramatic turns in some of these movies, but he's really always been on the backdrop of a comedic actor. This is a very drama filled role. He's going to win an Oscar for it. He's going to be up against Denzel Washington and all this great cast. I mean, it's a loaded cast. Jason Robards and Antonio Banderas and Joanne Woodward. These are all very drama filled actors that made their chops doing dramatic leads. And Tom Hanks being the lead on that is pretty impressive. I remember watching it thinking to myself, Tom Hanks can do it all, and we all know that now. But Philadelphia is kind of where it begins. That he becomes a really one of the most bona fide, top notch drama actors of all time.
Yeah, this is definitely the proving ground, if you will, for him. And that's why I say to this day, like his performance is so grounded in the right way that, and it's just one of those ones that just sticks with you. And then after you see it, and again, like I said, I saw it a little bit later on. I didn't see it directly in this window of time, but it weighs with you, and you think about it, and it did its job as a film, as a piece of art, and it proves that a comedian like him, someone who's primarily a comedic actor with, as you said, some dramatic elements, can literally help change the world. That's a big deal. This is art. This is a piece of art. And I think it's often overlooked because it was a big movie, but it is absolutely the definition of art if you were to ask me of that.
No, it did really well. I mean, it did really well too, which was kind of cool because it's a $26 million movie, did 207 million, was such a
Good grief.
heavy topic. I mean, of course, the backdrop and the plot is that he's a guy who is in a gay relationship, and he has AIDS, and he gets fired from his job, and then he seeks out an attorney to help him with this case, to file a lawsuit. And so, if you've never seen this movie, this has got to get to the top of your list pretty quick, because I mean, it's a classic, and it's got a classic soundtrack, and it's also just a great movie. I mean, everybody in it's outstanding, and yeah, I remember watching it in Carmike 10, and my mom was there, and yeah, it's pretty awesome. I've seen it quite a few times since then, as well. But it's a heavy movie, so it's
That's what I was
not
about to say. Yeah.
it's a heavy movie, so it's not something I watch all the time. It's not like Groundhog
Right.
Day, that, but yeah, it's a cool movie, man.
Yeah, it's good stuff. You mentioned the soundtrack. I remember the soundtrack having a big buzz to it. I remember the soundtrack being big, but I'll be honest with you. This is one of those moments where memory does not serve me well. I remember the poster art. I can see it, but I don't fully remember the details on that soundtrack.
So the big deal with this soundtrack is Bruce Springsteen had kind of taken a little hiatus, and he comes back with this soundtrack, and he
That's right.
releases the song "Streets of Philadelphia," which is going to ironically be his last top 10 hit as well. It's going to chart in the top 10. It's going to be his last top 10 hit of his career. Don't feel too bad for him, because he's had 12 top 10 hits, and he's had dozens of other songs that have at least charted. So I mean, he's doing fine. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it was a loaded soundtrack. You had Bruce Springsteen, you had Peter Gabriel, you had Sade, who I know you're a big fan of Sade,
Yeah. I
and
love to say Sade all the time.
the Indigo Girls, who will you're like, yeah, they're gonna play a part in our friendship later on down the road, though, in a big way. And I think the Spin Doctors actually do a really good song on this too. Have you ever seen The Rain? They cover the old
Oh
Creedence.
yeah.
It's pretty good. So if you've never heard that, check it out. But Neil Young, Howard Shore, they're all on it. I mean, it's a good soundtrack, and it was. And Bruce is going to win, an Academy Award for this song, just like Tom Hanks won an Academy Award for his performance. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, you're coming out of the gate with an extremely strong movie 3 days before Christmas. It's sentimental. Merry Christmas. You also get a gift of Bruce Springsteen's back. I mean, it's a beefy show. Did you have anything else you wanted to touch on before we jump into Christmas Day? Because it is so jam packed full of stuff. It's a little bit insane.
Yeah, no, I mean that's it. That's a good start. I mean, you got to remember all the great movies that are out at this time, and this all of a sudden this comes out. We've had all those sequels, so we talked about on the last episode with
Yep.
Sister Two and Wayne's World Two, and of course you had Schindler's List, and now you have Philadelphia. You got a lot of really thought provoking topics going on at one time.
Yeah, it's a really heavy year, and again, we've talked about this before. Is the indie scene is not quite in full bloom yet, but the level of filmmaking, even coming from the studios, is helping drive this more like, hey, we can be taken seriously. It doesn't always have to be like, I'm not knocking them, but like Sister Act 2 or Wayne's World, it doesn't just have to be a vehicle. And it's very interesting if you pay attention. You go back and look through 93, you're going to see these little gems that end up people from that or performances from that end up paying dividends down the road. And whether they're indie films or big films, they end up helping create this, nurturing this environment of much bigger people to come. It's a big deal coming through it. Now, here it is Christmas, and there's a guy, and God rest him, he's passed away. I'm pretty sure he's the voice here, but I believe it's still Kevin Conroy is the voice of Batman, because Batman Mask of the Phantasm comes out. And I'll tell you, I saw it because I, as a kid, loved Batman the Animated Series, the original stuff. I really enjoyed that stuff a lot. I enjoyed the way they told that cartoon and did the art. Again, I'm pretty sure this is Kevin Conroy, but
It is. You're right.
yeah, I was going to say, yeah, and I know that because like I was always a fan of. He is. Whereas Michael Keaton is the on-screen Batman for so many of us, Kevin Conroy is the voice of Batman for me. Will always, no one will ever. I mean, even old gravel throat himself can't touch Kevin Conroy, Christian Bale. Kevin Conroy is Batman's voice, and I appreciate him very much. But I remember this movie very specifically because not only did I see it, later on in my life, I would get a job at Suncoast Video where I met the guy Jim we mentioned.
Right.
But I sold a lot of copies of this movie, a lot,
Good.
and a lot of them on VHS. So I remember it very well.
That's where those secondary markets come into handy because this was like a $6 million movie that made right around $6 million. So those secondary markets, they appreciate that. They appreciate selling those VHS copies.
It's a ballsy move to put out a Batman animated film into theaters, and I don't know if we had the ability to do some like really hardcore digging. I wonder if this was a rights management issue, like they had to put out something Batman related to control the copyrights. That's something that often happens. Sometimes people ask why they just put out a bad some kind of movie, whatever it may be. But a lot of times studios have to make a movie to keep the copyrights. They have to produce a piece of content to keep the copyright held with them or the rights with them. And so I wonder if this is one of those, or it's a bold move. Is this Warner as well? Is this still a Warner product?
Yeah, it is. It's still Warner, and the thing about this film was it was originally supposed to be a direct-to-video release, and they probably would have it would probably benefited it a little bit because once you go to it's a good movie. I mean, it's if you've not checked this out, if as a Batman fan, if you've not seen Mask of Phantasm, it's really really well done. And I did see it in theaters. I would catch it or at the Dollar Theater, but that's where I caught it. But yeah, because with all the big releases, this is where I caught it eventually. But and also, I'm in St. Louis for Christmas in 1993, so I
Yep.
didn't. So I wasn't actually in Mobile at the time. I was actually in St. Louis, visiting my grandparents in 1993. So I caught this at the Dollar Theater when I got back into Mobile. But yeah, I mean, this is a really fun movie. The animated Batman films have never done it as well in theaters as the big Boffo live action, big budget ones with Keaton and Bale and Val Kilmer and all those guys. But yeah, I mean, it's a really good movie. and Mark Hamill does a voice here. Dana Delaney does a voice. Abe Vigoda does a voice. I mean, it's cool. But yeah, I mean, it's a Warner Brothers movie, released to theaters, originally a direct video release, which is where you sold all of your copies, and that's probably where most people caught it.
Yeah, in case anybody's wondering, Mark Hamill plays the Joker, and it's very iconic. I worked with Mark, not worked with him. I got to film Mark a while back, and I just wanted to hear a Joker laugh. I can't ask him to do that. And we were interviewing, and he said something, and somewhere it came up, and in the interview, he literally did a Joker moment, and so I got to have a private Joker moment with him. Anyway, as a Mark Hamill fan, a big deal. Now this leads into, so that comes out, and then a movie. I'm curious to see what the box office on the next one was, only because now I knew who Jack Lemmon was.
Right.
I knew who Walter Matthau was, but I didn't really know them as anything. Like they were my parents' actors. Like I didn't really care about them.
Right.
And Grumpy Old Men comes out, and I believe that's Burgess Meredith. Is that who else is in that? Who's the
He
is that who the
plays.
oldest?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
He plays the dad of.
And my God, this movie is classically funny. To this
Oh,
day, it's still hilarious. In fact,
yeah.
unfortunately, it's more relevant than it once was for me.
It's such a wonderful movie. I saw this Christmas Day in St. Louis at a theater that's now defunct. Unfortunately, we'll shout out to Keller Cinemas, which would close up as a Warenberg cinema, and then it would close up. It would reopen like a couple years later as a Dollar Theater, taken over by a different company, and now it's unfortunately within the last handful of years closed again permanently
Yeah.
and been gutted, and it's really kind of depressing every time I go up there to Sam's Club to see it. But yeah, it's Grumpy Old Men is a classic, man. It is. It did really well at the box office. It was like a $35 million comedy. I mean, it was pretty loaded, and it made like 81 million. It was really solid money for a comedy back then, of course, and also with guys who are were like a little older in nature, as far as their age. But I was always a huge fan of The Odd Couple growing up. I loved The Odd Couple. I loved the TV show, which starred Klugman and Tony Randall. But I was also a huge fan of the movie, and I was always a big Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau fan. I guess I'm kind of an old soul when it comes to this. When it comes to art and entertainment and stuff, and these guys were always people I really enjoyed watching as a kid. So I was pretty excited about this movie, probably more excited than a 17-year-old at the time should be, but I was.
Look, I to this day still it's a fantastic good movie. I even love later on, and we'll talk about the sequel. But I absolutely adore the movie. I remember it fondly, and again, it's another movie that I would end up selling at Suncoast later on in my life because it was a classic, and people would come by this movie. We also could show it, so I think it's one of the films that I could show there, and so I would show it because I thought it was great. And if I have to watch a movie over and over again, this is one of those that I can watch. There's another movie coming up that I literally could watch at any given point at any time. Tony knows that, but like, it's one of those movies I just really, really enjoyed it from top to bottom. It's just classic, good, clever writing and performance-based comedy, and you're not going to find two people that play off of each other better than these two guys. Like, it is just absolute brilliance. And I wonder how much of it's improv. I also heard that these guys don't work really long days.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what their production schedules, because I heard that, like, I think it's Jack Lemmon only works sixes, is
Yeah.
what I heard.
Yeah, it's funny. I worked with the cinematographer that did this movie, Johnny Jensen,
Yeah.
on a called Game of Their Lives. I did a soccer movie, and he shot that, and he's a really nice guy. Um, but but yeah, I mean, he would talk about this schedule a little bit when I would kind of ask him about it, and he was like, yeah, man, we didn't shoot anywhere above like 10 hours every day. I was like, that's great, man, because we're shooting like 14 right now in this movie. So yeah. But I mean, that's what happens. But it's nice when you can get it.
Yeah. So everybody knows, like, there are the standard film workday is 12 hours. For some crew. For Tony's position, it's got to be 14 to 16 minimum.
Oh,
You're always going to add an hour to 2 hours to whatever the wrap time is when you finish. And the fact is, that if Jack is only working 6 hours, would have meant that Tony probably didn't have to work but about 8 to 10 hours max.
right.
Incredible
Funny man.
stuff.
Did I did a I did a movie not related to this, but I did a movie called My Own Love Song with Renee Zellweger and Forrest Whitaker and all these guys, and it was directed by a Frenchman, and we did like 8 hours. We would do like 8 to 10 hours. That was it, you know. And I remember him coming in one day, and it was supposed to be this whole elaborate scene at this old like leper colony, and it was this whole elaborate scene. We had talked about it in prep. We had scouted it. It was supposed to be like at least 10 hours of work, and all of a sudden we go in on the day, and he starts looking at it, and starts looking at it, and starts looking at it, and starts talking to his first AD, who was also French, and his buddy. And then all of a sudden, I start getting reports like, "You better hurry up with that call sheet because this is a oneer, and we're gonna be done in four
Oh my
hours."
God.
And I was like, "Oh, you gotta be kidding me!" And it's snowing in Louisiana. It was insane. It was an insane day.
Yeah.
No relation to
See,
this movie except for the fact it snows in this movie.
there you go. Good job bringing it back, buddy. Good job bringing it back. If you haven't seen that movie, I'm not going to snipe any of Tony's picks, but Grumpy Old Men is an instant classic that is worth a view. And we'll get to more on that, I'm sure, when we get to his picks. Next on deck is Heaven and Earth. Now, I don't
Deep movie.
Huh? What's that?
It was a deep movie.
Yeah, I know I didn't see this movie. I can tell you for a fact.
I did see this movie. I saw it. There's another Dollar Theater one for me. Movies 10.
Yeah.
Movies 10 is my savior because when movies would get past me, that's the beautiful thing about the Dollar Theater, right? When movies get past you in the first run theaters, you always had the Dollar Theater that you could. And I was still going to school at Arnold School at this time. It's right
Right.
across the street from me. I can go check out any movie I went to after school, and that's what I did. And so it was, yeah. I mean, Heaven and Earth, Oliver Stone. People might not even realize this is an Oliver Stone film. Oliver Stone's a big director. This one always seems to be something nobody ever talks about, but at the time it had some big names in it. I mean, Oliver Stone directs. Tommy Lee Jones, who we've seen already this year in The Fugitive, which is a massive movie, but this is not as big. But yeah, I mean, it didn't do it nearly as well. It was a box office flop at the time for sure because it was like a $30 million movie that did 6 million. But
Yikes.
it gets kind of lost in all these other movies that come out at Christmas time. And Joan Chin is in it. It's a really, really well crafted movie about um, a girl who gets kidnapped and she's raped by the Viet Cong and she's going through a lot of bad things in her life. And then they have, because of that rape, they have to leave their village. Her and her family have to leave their village, and they eventually come back because she gets pregnant, and eventually has to leave that because she gets pregnant from a married man. So they have to come back, and she meets Tommy Lee Jones, who's an American, and he's really nice to her and everything else. And they eventually get married. They move to San Diego, and then he becomes very violent from his PTSD from everything he's had to deal with. And it's a very deep film. It's got a lot of crazy scenes in it, um, but one that probably should be seen.
Ooh, it's heavy though. I mean, the strategy on dropping that movie at Christmas time.
Bring tissues.
Yeah, it's heavy. That's heavy.
Yeah, bring tissues. It's got a lot of
Yeah.
those types of things in it.
It's definitely, especially, we've talked about my propensity at this age. I'm talking about my age in 93, folks. The propensity of me not to enjoy anything that wasn't just, poop and fart humor or action means that this movie never made it onto my radar. and it may not ever make it on my radar. I may try and watch it for Tony, but that is some
It's
dense.
yeah. And and it deals with. I mean, I don't want to ruin anything, but I mean, like, yeah, I mean, it deals with suicide, it deals with a lot of. I mean, a lot of very adult topics. I mean, so it's not something you would have seen back when you were 15 years old,
Right.
probably. You know, yeah,
Yeah, probably not. Um, and especially because one of on my permanent on my permanent top 5 movies
it was a good one.
is queued up, and that's the movie Tombstone. And when I say top 5, please understand, my top 5 list is movies that I literally can watch at any moment, at any place in the movie, at any time of day if I feel like watching it. I can sit down and watch the movie Tombstone. It's in my
Yeah,
top 5.
so
No
good.
chronological. It is one of the best. It's one of the most quotable movies of all time, in my opinion. I think everybody listening to this podcast is of age to turn to your neighbor right now and say, "I'm your Huckleberry," because we've all done it.
Yeah,
Tremendous performances out of every cast member. And again, huge fan of Michael Biehn at this point. Like
yeah,
Michael Biehn a lot. So I'm excited to see him. Johnny Ringo is the greatest.
yeah.
It is hands down, still to my day, one of my favorite Westerns. There's a story about it that I'm sure Tony and I can both talk about, but I'll let you give some more info on this and we can jump back to the story. But how did this movie do? I don't even know how it did, because it just, to me, was the greatest thing I'd ever seen.
No, it was good. I mean, it was a $25 million western to about 74 million. So I mean, that's solid at the time,
Oh, yeah.
especially when you're dealing. But this cast, I want to talk about this cast.
Yes.
Okay, I want to talk about this cast because here we are in 2024. We've seen how all these people have played out now. Throughout. I mean, they were huge. They were all pretty big then, but this cast is pretty remarkable. Let's go. I just want to go through the names real quick. Okay,
Yeah.
Kurt Russell, obvious
Epic.
legend. Val Kilmer, obvious
Epic.
legend. And at the time, 1983, this guy's making banger after banger. Like every movie he's coming out with is gold.
Yeah.
Michael Biehn, obviously, he's been in some great movies, and we loved him. Powers Booth, great
Yep.
actor. Robert Burke,
Yep.
Dana Delaney, who also had a voice in Mask of Phantasm, so she's big
Yep.
around this. Still, Sam Elliott,
Yeah.
obviously
Classic.
one of the great guys. I've worked with him; he's awesome. Stephen Lang, Joanna
Oh,
Pacula.
see,
Yeah,
you
Stephen
forget
Lang.
that. I think people forget that Stephen Lang is the drunk, idiot in this movie.
Yeah,
And it's testament to how good of an actor Stephen Lang is, and how, unfortunately for him, so good he's forgettable. So good at his roles, he's forgettable. So
so
good
many.
for you,
There's
Stephen Lang.
so many people in this movie. You kind of forget some of the people who are actually in it. I mean, Joanna Pacula, Bill Paxton. Come on,
God rest him. God rest him.
Jason Priestley,
Yep.
Michael Rooker,
Yep. He's so
who's
good in it
already
too.
had one of the greatest action movies of all time come out with Cliffhanger. He's having a big year.
Yep.
John Tenney, Billy Zane,
Hold on, we have an internet interruption.
Charlton Heston.
Gotcha. I got you back. You're back. You're back.
Oh, yeah, but John Tenney, Billy Zane, Charlton Heston, Michael Rooker. I mean, come on, man. Michael Rooker.
Yeah, the list of people in this movie, that's what I'm saying. As a 15-year-old boy, these are all dudes that have been in movies that I love. So
Oh, yeah.
it's hands down one of the most fun.
Did
Who
you see
actually
the
directed this?
What's that? Did you see it in theaters?
I did see it in theaters. I sure did. I saw it with my dad.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, George Cosmatos directed this.
Okay.
He passed away many years ago,
Yeah.
but yeah, he was awesome director. I mean, dude,
So
he did Rambo Part 2. Come on, man.
what's fascinating is
Cobra.
Tony and I, Cobra's a classic. Tony and I worked on a movie called Dead Birds.
We did.
And that movie was it was not a Western. It was a post Civil War Western horror film kind of thing. And in fact, it was one of Steve Yedlin's first movies. Steve Yedlin goes on to be the cinematographer for, I can't stand him. The guy that ruined Star Wars. He directed Last Jedi. Whatever. Ryan Johnson.
You're a big fan.
My opinion. Not just my opinion. Anyway, we worked on this movie, and the primary costumer, and I cannot remember his name to save my life. I don't know if you know it or can find it, but the primary costumer one day, we're working on this movie, and I'm in the movie. I'm a key character. I'm a key character in this movie. I was a PA on this film, and they needed someone to have a long rifle, and that was me. I was the key character. I had a long rifle. I got to shoot the Thomas, what's his name from E.T. I get to shoot him, and it sets off a series of events.
Oh, Henry Thomas, yeah.
Henry Thomas, thank you.
Yep.
Anyway, long story short, the costumer and I are talking as he's fitting me with this. He's putting me in this Civil War outfit, and we're asking questions. And he starts explaining to me that, you know, I am not in appropriate attire because the buttons are wrong. And he talks about how I believe George, who was directing this movie, was pedantic on everything being Western accurate. Now, if you've seen Tombstone, we all know that it is a little, not necessarily the most perfectly, quote, accurate movie. That's why it makes it good, because the West was brutal and boring. And he talks about how pedantic he was and how many fights and problems they had, and that there were days, troubled days during the production of Tombstone where they would shut down because he would be so upset that the buttons would be wrong on a background actor who is 50 to 60 feet away from the camera, and this guy couldn't get past it, and they had all kinds of trouble. So what he told me, now again, this is my memory. I was probably 22, maybe, somewhere in there at the time, so pardon me for 24 years of various abuse to my brain. He told me that actually Kurt Russell ends up directing this movie. George gets the credit, but Kurt directs the movie because George could not get out of his own way. And Kurt Russell clearly was a genius. George had some genius in this. And then the costumer, whatever his name was, also had some genius. But it was an incredibly crazy story. One of my all-time favorite films, and this guy's telling me like it almost didn't exist because of buttons, literally being the wrong specification on a background actor that you wouldn't even see. And by the way, this guy not only showed up to set every day dressed in period authentic clothing, and I don't mean the 2000s. This guy dressed in the time frame of the movie in which we are filming. So he was dressed as a Civil War era person while doing costumes of Civil War people, which I thought was an interesting touch. I'm sure the costumer for Striptease did not do that because they would have been naked. But he lived the part. Anyway, it was very fascinating. That's a true story. And I think I don't know about the Kurt Russell part. That's what he told me. But the pedantic buttons and all that stuff, he used that exact word. And that's why I remember it to this day. It was a very, very, very interesting bit of dialogue that kind of shaped my entire reality of film later on in life. But Tombstone and Dead Birds, that ties it back over to it.
No, I love it. I mean, that's, it's good stuff. I mean, Tombstone was always great. I remember seeing it. I saw it a couple times at theaters because I saw that one when I came back and it was still playing, and I saw that at Carmike for sure, and then I checked it out at the Dollar Theater as well. So yeah, it's a good one. I mean, like you said, man, something about Kurt Russell, man. We don't get enough Kurt Russell movies. We should get more of them.
Yeah,
I know he's
when he even,
but still.
but when he even showed up in the Fast and Furious, and I was happy. Like I was like, I could have used a movie of just him.
Yeah,
I would have been fine.
Yeah, my mom. We just saw the movie Red One.
I haven't watched it yet.
It's so good. But there's a character because Krampus is in the movie, and my mom swore for about 5 minutes that was Kurt Russell, and I'm like, no, it's not Kurt Russell. It's not Kurt Russell. But everyone likes to see him pop up in movies. It's Kurt Russell's classic. He's the man.
Yeah, he is a classic. Yeah. 100%. 100%. What's interesting is you have these big studio movies. So most of the stuff we've talked about has been a big studio movie. And Tony, again, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. The movie that comes up behind this is an independent film, as far as I
Yep.
know. It's an indie film called What's Eating Gilbert Grape. This is the beginning. So I mentioned this in the very beginning that we would get to this point. This is one of the movies that really starts to kick off, and I don't know its performance in box office. I just know the lore. It starts to kick off the independent scene. And I don't mean indie as a genre. I'm talking about independent filmmakers making a push. This is where we start to see more Tarantino type people, anybody in that space. There's a whole list of directors from this time frame in the 90s that are pivotal for filmmaking. This is one of the movies that starts kicking this stuff off. And it stars a little known actor at this point. I don't think he's very well known. And that is who, Tony?
Well, we're gonna have it's What's Eating Gilbert's Grape, and it's Johnny Depp and a little guy. Maybe you heard him, Leonardo DiCaprio.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, listen, Lasse Hallström directed this movie, and it was eventually distributed by Paramount. So that's big. But yeah, it is an independent movie. It was done by an independent company, and I mean, it was definitely an indie. It was shot for 10 million and made like 11 million. It was not huge by any stretch of the imagination, considering it had Johnny Depp and Leo together. And obviously, there's parts of their careers that if you would put them together in a movie, it would make $500 million.
Yep.
Clearly, and so I mean, it has your girl in it, Juliette Lewis, who I know you
Ugh.
love.
Oof.
Big fan of her voice, and you love watching everything that she does, and going to see her band, which we just
Wait,
went to her concert not too long ago.
what was the old line? I celebrate her entire library, her entire catalog.
I celebrate you. Celebrate her entire catalog. Yes, absolutely.
Oh,
John C.
Lord.
Riley too. He's
Yeah,
really great.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, and Mary Steenburgen is in this too.
I love her.
And I don't know what it is about this year, but she seems to be in every movie that's come out.
Yeah,
'Cause I'm going to say her name like 3 times today, and I feel like she's in a lot of movies at this point. But she's a great
yeah.
actress, and of course she's Ted Danson's wife in real life. But and she's a wonderful actress. But I mean, yeah, she's in a lot of films at this juncture of time. This is
So
a
part of
really
the
good
reason
movie.
it's a great movie, and part of the reason why I say it's so important is because this movie ends up in film lore in terms of like the independent cinema of the age group. So imagine Pony and I both become filmmakers. This movie is part of the catalyst. I said it once before, but like this movie got talked about. It was almost underground, even though it was wide released. When it did come out for rent, there was only one copy, and if you were an indie film guy and you were interested in filmmaking, this movie was something that people sought out even after the fact. For a few years after the fact, it carried its own. And this is prior to Leo being massive. Like no one, I mean, the girls all liked him, but this is pre-Titanic. He has not blown the world up yet. Like he is not there yet.
He's going to get
But
an nomination for this movie, though.
yeah, he does. That's exactly
Oscar
right. That's what I was going to say.
Globe nomination. He's not going to win, but he's going to be nominated for this film. I mean, it's kind of it's a coming of age drama with a lot of comedic elements. It's a great film in those genres, but it's kind of a deep subject matter because you got
Yeah.
a guy, and he's played by Johnny Depp, who's taking care of his mentally disabled younger brother, who's played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and his morbidly obese mother, who can't really do anything for herself. So you've got him taking care of all his family, and it's a pretty deep topic. So I mean, I think that kind of lends itself to not always being huge at the box office, especially when you're an indie movie that's releasing that kind of topic. But that's the way it went down. It wasn't huge at the box office, but it has done very well since then. So don't feel too bad
Yeah.
for it.
Now, and again, there's the subject matter, whereas like Heaven and Earth arguably could have been an indie film, except the subject matter required a lot of travel, right?
Sure.
But the subject matter in this is so human that this is what I'm like. Even that storytelling is what you start to see come through in more indie films as we get in deeper into this period of time and this period of film. All right, so next one on deck is this is a big show coming up, and it's not probably big for a lot of people that listen to this, but it's a big deal. And the reason it's a big deal, unless this is not the movie I think it is, which would be amazing because I could set this whole thing up and be wrong.
I hope you do.
Yeah. Well, I'm assuming this is Ghost in the Machine is up next.
Yes.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, is probably the most popular anime in the history of anime.
So, yeah, I mean, yeah, but this is not anime here though.
So this is not that movie. See, I set it up for you and did not go in the right direction. So I have no idea what this movie is.
Yeah, I was like, I was starting to wonder, and then you were like, no, this is not that film, buddy.
See, I told.
This is
Name your movies better. Name your movies better.
That's why it didn't do all that well either. Unfortunately, it's a sleek science fiction horror film though. About this guy. He's a serial killer, and he's got a really interesting way of picking his victims. He steals address books from
wow.
people, and then tears out sheets from these books and picks his victims that way.
Oh, interesting.
So that's a very interesting way to present a serial killer in a movie to me, which is one of the reasons I like this film. Because as a true crime guy, I was really fascinated by that, as a plot. On his way to going somewhere, he has an accident, and he ends up in an MRI machine, and it has a meltdown, and he ends up in the machine.
Okay.
So it's obviously based on a true story, clearly. And and then he goes on a killing spree using networks and things like that. So it's cool. I mean, there's some really good kills in this movie. Okay, like the first kill is like a guy tries to use a microwave, and the microwave gets radiated, and it radiates the entire kitchen. It's pretty neat, man. You gotta love it.
It's good
stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's several great kills. It's stars Karen Allen and Chris Mulkey. It was like a $12 million movie that did like $5 or $6 million, and
this whole segment.
Look at the movies it's coming out against. It goes and they're like, let's drop this little independent horror movie in the middle of Schindler's List in Philadelphia. That's genius.
It is just the most botched segment in the history of. If you go back and you at least knew what it was, but if you listen to the whole concept, the whole thing, that's got to be my favorite segment we've ever recorded on a movie. Karen Allen, as in Karen Allen from Superman.
Yeah, Karen Allen from. No, Karen Allen is
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, who are you getting mixed up? I don't know if you know what you're talking about anymore. I think you're lost. Yeah, no, she's from Raiders of the Lost Ark and Scrooge.
Right. Yeah.
And you're like,
what's the lady's name from Superman?
Margot Kidder.
Margot Kidder. The same person. They're the same person.
You got to do some homework.
They're the same person.
They're not the same person. We've had these. So for anybody that doesn't know, obviously know us all the time. We do this all the time. He names somebody. I tell him he's wrong, and he says, no, they're the same person. They're the same person. He's been doing this for over 30 years. He drives me nuts.
It's a real thing. It's a very real thing. I do not know that movie. I am going to go watch the trailer because it does sound. Obviously, it's going to be in today's culture. I'm not culture, but in today's technology, it's going to be very dated. But I am curious to see about it. It sounds wild, and it's probably ripe for a remake somewhere. Unfortunately, and I'm sure somebody will chase it down. Behind this movie, though, is another epically. I don't know if this movie got Oscar noms or not, we would have a connection to it, I believe, later on in life.
We will, yeah,
But
big
yeah,
time.
it's is In the Name of the Father, which is, my God, one of the. I mean, it's another dense movie for us in here. '93 was about density at the end of the year, bro.
Yeah. Well, it got nominated for a lot of Oscars. In the Name of the
Okay,
Father
good.
movie, it did really well. Yeah, I mean, it's directed by Jim Sheridan, who seemed to be like Daniel Day Lewis's personal director. Like this guy has directed so many Daniel Day Lewis films. Like every one of his iconic movies is directed. Oh, not every one of them, but quite a few of his iconic movies, like My Left Foot. I mean, come on, and he's directed a lot of Daniel Day Lewis, like his personal director. But yeah, it's a In the Name of the Father is a really, really good movie, and it's
It's great.
about. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and of course, it's nominated for 7 Oscars. So for the people that enjoy watching the Oscar movies, and there's quite a few of you out there, this is one of them you probably have already caught. But it's about Jerry Conlon, who's like, who's mistaken as an IRA sniper, and then of course he's part of the Guildford Four who get mistaken as the people that set off the Guildford pub bombings, and so he has to go through this whole mistaken identity, trying to clear his name and everything else. And of course, I have this poster signed by Mark Shepard, who would play one of the Guildford Four, and in this movie. Um, yeah, so he would, and he would play Patty Armstrong, one of the Guildford Four. I had to look that name
Yep.
up for seconds. I forgot it was off the top of my head. Didn't come, but yeah, I mean it's in. If you haven't seen it, it's a classic movie. You've seen it though.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's great. It's
Yeah.
great. I was this is I got me and Jeff Worley, so shout out to old Swirlberg. He and I got really obsessed in high school with the IRA because this is going on at the time. The IRA situation is
Yeah.
going
Cool.
on. Yeah,
Interesting.
it was very fascinating, and so we were really obsessed with that. And so anything we could watch or read about or talk to even his dad, who's an old spook, we would talk about the IRA stuff. And so this movie has connections to that, obviously. And so I had seen it in that side. But it was interesting later on to get to work with Mark, and even in my case, direct Mark, and deal with Mark. I can't tell a lot
Yeah.
of those stories. Woo.
Yeah.
There's lots. Some of the hardest parts of directing, some of the weirdest things I ever had happen to me on a film set, Mark was there for. And so a lot of crazy stuff. In fact, the movie, whoops, wrong hand. The movie is right behind. Mark's name is right behind me somewhere up in this poster
Yeah.
above my head.
Sons of Liberty
He was in,
up
yeah, he
there.
was in a movie with us called Sons of Liberty. And
Yeah.
anyway, long story short, Mark's a great guy. The movie's fantastic, and it is one of those films that holds up because it's a historical piece. So you can watch it and still sort of appreciate the history of where it came from, so you don't lose anything. And then the performances are good because, I mean, if nothing else, Mark's a good actor, but you also really the guy that you're looking at here is Daniel Day Lewis, and so great movie, solid, solid, solid.
The cool thing about Daniel Day Lewis is he's in a lot of iconic movies, and a lot of them are directed by Jim Sheridan, obviously. But he only does, at points in his career, he only do like a movie every 2 years.
Yeah,
Then later on in his career, he'd only do a movie like every 3 years. Then at the very end of his career, he'd do a movie like every 5 years. So he's kind of like the actor equivalent of like James Cameron, who releases a movie like every 10 years. You know,
yeah.
it's like, and so anytime you get to watch this guy on screen, it's kind of a treat to me.
Oh, for sure,
I've just
for sure.
always been a big fan of his and Gangs of New York, and Bill the Butcher. I mean, come on, and There Will Be Blood. I mean, that's just
Yeah.
two hugely iconic movies. But I remember watching My Left Foot with a buddy of mine when I was about 11 years old in New Jersey. And that's like it's a pretty deep movie to watch when you're 11 years old. But we did
Oh
it.
yeah,
But
yeah. And
yeah,
he commands the screen very well. He's truly an actor and an artist in the sense of that. If you think about, like, he's not doing it for money, clearly it's for him. It is about the right script, right project, the whole thing. And if he ever comes back, we'll see.
he's
But
coming back. He's doing a movie. He has written a movie with his son, Ronan Day Lewis, who will also direct him. He's going to direct him. His son is going to direct Daniel Day Lewis. That's going to be really interesting to see.
Yeah, I hope we can find somebody on that set that will tell us the truth because I bet that's an interesting dynamic, if nothing else.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. But he's coming back to do that movie, so that's we haven't seen Daniel since yeah, probably about 7 years at this point. So yeah.
That's killer. So we have that. Then we have a film. I'm not going to set it up. I'm going to go ahead and just because I know nothing about it. I'm going to let you talk about the next movie all the way through, and then I'll tell you if I remember it. So the next movie on deck is not from my lips.
And you would never have caught this in 1993.
No.
No, this was a movie. I did see this in theaters. Carmike 10. My mom was there. Anthony Hopkins, Deborah Winger. You got two of the most iconic drama actors of all time. You know, in a movie called Shadowlands, directed by one of the most iconic drama directors of all time, Richard Attenborough, who's having a monster year because he's been in Jurassic Park, and yeah, I mean he's got this great film, which is about C.S. Lewis. Who
Oh,
wrote
interesting.
yeah, and Jewish American poet Joey Davidman, who would eventually die of cancer, and so this is about their meetup and their lives together. So it's a really deep movie, obviously, with a lot of drama. And Anthony Hopkins in 1993 is just an amazing, amazing talent. Of course, we talked about Bram Stoker's Dracula and a lot of the movies he's been in, but he's another one of those guys. When I talk about guys like Daniel Day Lewis or I talk about Kurt Russell, I pretty much have to watch almost every Anthony Hopkins movie.
Yeah, he puts out he later on he might have done some money jobs, but for the
Yeah,
most part, this guy in this part of his career for sure.
no,
And when I say
believe.
later on, I'm talking about 2020. But
Yeah,
like up until that point, this guy is everything he's in is solid. It's an interesting movie. I do not know it at all. I have no idea. But being someone fascinated by those two authors would be interesting to understand it a little bit more. I may put that actually on my own personal list because it seems again heavy but interesting.
yeah. I mean, it's not something you would have watched in 1993. You'd have been bored out of your mind. I know you would have
Yeah.
come back like this is the worst movie of all time. But it is a good movie. I mean, if you like, I sometimes just like watching actors do their thing against each other and just seeing all that play out. And this is what you get with when you get a Deborah Winger who is a lot like Daniel Day Lewis, just doesn't do a lot of movies. And I mean, of
Right.
course, she's older now, but even back then, she would take these long periods of hiatus and not do a movie for a year or two and stuff like that. And I really, as a person who does movies, I respect that. That they have downtime and they're actors who make a lot more than me usually, but so they get a little bit more time to do that. But it's pretty neat to see. I do like to watch good actors play against each other in movies, which is what you get here. And Richard
Well,
Attenborough, great director.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Nothing wrong with that. It's funny you're saying that is because I was going to just say like you have great actors playing against each other, and that is like what I would argue is the definition of what you get out of 1993 is you get nothing but incredible. There's so many great performance. We're just looking at you just look at this month alone, and you got Performance City USA. Now go back through the previous episodes, and we have hit on some stuff. And again, there's personal things in here for us, like we've talked about. But in terms of external us, just the world's view of it, there are tremendous performances and moments that come out of 93, which I think, we talked about how it meant to us personally, but I think from a film standpoint, I think 1993 is a pretty important year in terms of films.
I would agree. I mean, I really loved 1993. A lot of the movies that pop up in 1993 end up making my top 10, top 15, top 20, somewhere in there. Of course, my lists always juggle and change, and depending on who I'm telling it to. But that's But 1993 does put a lot of one there, man. I mean, nothing else. You got So I Married an Axe Murderer. Come on.
That's what I was going to say.
You got
If
some.
somebody, because somebody somewhere's like, I wonder what these guys' favorite movie in '93 was. Well, you should know we gave 2 full hours to talk about one movie that nobody saw
I mean,
at the time.
I mean, look, you got Saw Mary Axe Murder, you got Rudy, you got Dazed and Confused. Those three movies alone stand on
Yeah,
my top 15. You know,
yeah,
it's two of those movies are in my top five.
right.
You know, I mean, you got Tombstone, who you put
Yeah,
in the top five. I mean, I'm assuming is
yeah.
probably your favorite Western of all time. You know,
Oh, 100%. And
yeah.
so Emerity's in that list. And then again, there's a lot, dude. There's a lot. But to your point, yes, 2 movies right out of the gate that are immediately in that spot, right? Obviously, I can't, you know, we got Army of Darkness. Like, I
Yeah.
can't deny it,
Cliff,
you know, like
come on, man.
cliffhanger. Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot. This is a pivotal year. And to close it out, it's a pivotal year. So I'm gonna ask this. I'm gonna ask this, and it's a harder question
Yeah,
because I know you have Tony's picks, and people want to hear those. But
right.
can you throw for one of your picks? Will you throw a movie? Just throw a movie in there that you think should be seen from 1993 that is not So I Married an Axe Murderer. You're not allowed to throw that one in there.
Oh yeah. Well, we've done a lot of them.
There's a lot of movies. I'm
Um,
scrolling. I'm scrolling while we're
I
talking.
have to look at this a little bit because there's so many that we've talked about, and we have done picks on all these. But
It's tough. It's
it's
tough because there's some
difficult.
classics. I'm going to go ahead and I'll buy you some time, and I'm going to go ahead and say, look, I'm going to go back to. I am not telling you to watch this movie because I think it's a great film. It is not a great film. It is not even a good film. It's an amazing film. Um, I'm not telling you that you're going to particularly enjoy it, especially if. Let me just say this right now: if you actually like watching Oscar movies, don't waste your time with this recommendation whatsoever. But I'm going to go ahead and say Army of Darkness. And the reason why I'm going to say that is my pick for 1993 is just because while Tombstone will always live with me, man, Army of Darkness comes back and just it does a lot for me. It's a very personal thing, but it does a lot. And again, I've seen a lot of movies with my parents, but I just will never forget my dad's face at like, what the hell am I seeing? Like his face was just and
Right.
to this day, I'll remember it. It's just a big deal. So I'm going to go ahead and throw it out on the limb and say Army of Darkness, as we called it. But Army of Darkness would be my pick for 1993. That is not So Married an Axe Murderer.
Well, in that again, this is what the show is about because you had a great moment with your dad there, which kind of
Right,
probably influences that pick.
100%.
Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna say because we've gotten some mail on this one, and everybody that's watched it so far has thought this movie is brilliant. I've gotten people that have said this is now in their top five or top 10. So I'm going to throw it back out there just to keep giving it love. So if people are just finding the show for the first time, I'm going to throw it out there once again. It came out in 1993. Danny DeVito,
I knew it.
Jack the Bear.
I knew it.
Jack the Bear. It is a lost classic because it just came out at the wrong time. It is an amazing film. It's not a
Yeah,
good film. It's an amazing film. And
yeah.
if you can find it, and that's tough because it's not streaming, you're going to have to probably purchase it in some way, shape, or form, or you can probably get it as a rental on Amazon or something like that for a couple bucks. But is worth it. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. This is a lost classic. You must watch it. Jack the Bear, Danny DeVito, Julie Louis Dreyfus. It's an amazing film. Young Reese Witherspoon. Classic, classic, classic. Watch it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you on that. That's a good call. And I knew you were going to end up saying that because of uh, how much impact that movie ends up having and how solid of a film it is. So that's a good call. Good call. Did you have any picks? Did you have any picks from this month you wanted to throw in, or this episode you wanted to throw in there aside from that, and then we'll zip out of here?
Yeah, I'm going to go with What's Eating Gilbert Grape.
Nice call. Well
It's a
done.
good. I don't think a lot of people have seen it, and it involves those two iconic actors for sure. And I think people should at least see what really created the Johnny Depp Leonardo DiCaprio hype, because that movie launches them as these great drama actors that can do any role, and that's pretty impressive.
There you go. I mean, that's a brilliant note. Great idea. Again, I think that's a perfect pick to close it out. So that's it for 1993. But we'll be back next episode with we're into 94. Whole new world. Whole new world.
1994 is crazy, people. You're
There's a
gonna
lot.
you're gonna find out why I hang out underneath this man's window at his house as we talk to each other like Romeo and Juliet. You're gonna figure out why that's gonna happen in 1994.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff that's about to pop in. There's a
He's
lot of weird stuff.
he's gonna get grounded like nobody's ever been grounded before. It's gonna be brilliant.
I don't think I had a lot of free time in 1994, to be honest with you. It could be there's a huge void of movies that I've never even heard of because I was grounded so much. There's a
So
real reality to this. Nothing's changed. Thank you guys and gals and folks for listening. We appreciate you. Again, you can find us on all your social media favorites. We're there for you. Come hang out with us. Join the Facebook group. Post your own stuff if you find something fun from the past. We love seeing any of it. It doesn't matter what era. We just love talking about that stuff. So feel free to join the conversation. And again, we will see you next time. I'm out. Tony?
See you later. Peace.